May I also say welcome to those of you who are visiting with us. As I look around, I see some very dear friends and good neighbors that are a part of the community around the church building that are here this morning. And I certainly appreciate your being here. So nice to have you. Brother Larry Bertram, a recent visitor with us a few weeks ago, asked the elders in a meeting a question: what is this congregation's greatest need, he said. What a thought-provoking question that was. How would you answer such a question? What is our greatest need? I've thought of it often since then, and I'm sure the other elders have also. We gave him an answer on that occasion, and I'll share it with you in just a few minutes. In order to determine our greatest need, it becomes necessary to look carefully into every possible area which is critical to the life of the church, to determine our strengths and our weaknesses. Paul looked at such needs when he wrote to various congregations of the Lord's church in the first century, and he addressed those needs firmly and with the authority of God, and they benefited by those words. Think with me for just a few minutes about our greatest need. Love for one another is one of the greatest needs of the Lord's church in any period of time, be it the first century or the 20th century. In fact, Jesus placed this high on the list of Christian characteristics, as well as an identifying mark of those who would wear his name. John chapter 13, verses 34 and 35. A new commandment I give unto you, that you love one another, as I have loved you, that you also love one another. By this shall all men know that you are my disciples, if you have love one to another. But I do not believe that love for each other is our greatest need in this congregation. I sincerely believe that we already have a great love for each other. This congregation would not have survived the passing years, united and bonded together as it has, if there was not a tremendous amount of love among us. I know of no congregation which has had fewer internal problems. Peace has characterized this church for many years. How is the church going and how is it doing where you preach is a question that I've often heard asked by other preachers in meetings and at lectureships. The usual answer is numbers. Well, we have so many that are present on Sunday morning, our contribution is such and such. But I've always responded when asked that question, we are at peace and working together, and things are going real good. Lack of love for one another is not a problem for us. More love is not our greatest need, however, we would do well to pay attention to the command of the Apostle Paul as he wrote to another congregation which knew such love as we have for each other. 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, verses 9 and 10. Paul said, but as touching brotherly love, you need not that I write unto you, for ye yourselves are taught of God to love one another. And indeed you do it toward all the brethren which are in all Macedonia. But we beseech you, brethren, that you increase more and more. Standing firm and true for the authority of the Scriptures is always a great need. But even this is not our greatest need. I think one of the most notable achievements of this congregation has been its refusal to stray from the old paths, those old paths as outlined in God's Word. Through the passing years, other congregations in our brotherhood have known the pain of division simply because they did not hold to sound doctrine. A willingness to sacrifice scriptural soundness to achieve growth has been the cause of painful scars that will forever remind them of the price that is paid when departing from God's way. But sound, watchful leadership has prevented such painful scars for us. And in my opinion, such leadership is still maintaining a watchful eye, making sure that there will be no departure from the truth. I think some words spoken by Jesus to a church of the first century apply quite aptly to this congregation. Revelation chapter 2, the first 3 verses. As Jesus speaks through the pen of the Apostle John, to the angels of the church in Ephesus write, "These are the words of him who holds the 7 stars in his right hand and walks among the 7 golden lampstands. I know your deeds, your hard work and your perseverance. I know that you cannot tolerate wicked men, that you have tested those who claim to be apostles but are not, and have found them false. You have persevered and have endured hardships for my name and have not grown weary." That church had other problems, but notice what Jesus said concerning their stand for the truth. A firm stand for truth is always a great need, but it is not our greatest need. A faithful preacher of the gospel is always a great need for the Lord's church, wherever that church might meet, in Hopewell or elsewhere. This congregation needs and deserves a preacher who is dedicated and energetic, a preacher who is capable of inspiring us to be more effective in the Lord's work, a man who will have complete loyalty to the Scriptures and respect for their absolute authority, a preacher who has no tolerance for error, nor for anyone who would attempt to lead the church in a departure, however slight it might be, from those old paths. A preacher who will be kind and gentle to old and young alike. A man who will weep with us when we weep, and who will share our happiness when we are happy. A preacher who will be totally impartial as he moves in and out of the lives of those who touch his life. But this is not our greatest need, because we feel that we have such a man to be our preacher. For several months, the elders in the church have looked for the man that I've just described, and feel that our search was successful when we found Brother Merle Worthy, who has arrived and is ready to become our new preacher. And we welcome him, his wife Norma, his sons John and Jeff, to our church family here. So you see, a gospel preacher possessing qualities that I've just outlined is not our greatest need, because we have such a man. Well, Billy, what is our greatest need? What was the answer the elders gave to Brother Bertram? Well, this was the answer. Our greatest need is to have a renewed commitment to personal evangelism, a deeper sense of responsibility to reaching out to the lost with the gospel of Christ. For us to become totally convinced, absolutely convinced, that the gospel of Christ is mankind's only hope to be saved. As Paul said in Romans 1 verse 16, "I am not ashamed of the gospel of Christ, for it is the power of God unto salvation to everyone that believeth, to the Jew first and also to the Greek." To be fully convinced that the most precious thing in all of this world is a soul. That Jesus said, "What is a man profited if he shall gain the whole world and lose his own soul?" Such a commitment and sense of responsibility has always been the impetus which caused the Lord's church to grow. It is what characterized the church and its phenomenal growth in the first century. In Acts chapter 8, verse 1 and then verse 4, we see outlined that commitment. And at that time there was a great persecution against the church which was at Jerusalem. And they were all scattered abroad throughout the regions of Judea and Samaria, except the apostles. And then in verse 4, therefore they that were scattered abroad went everywhere preaching the word. That was one of the outstanding marks of this church, as it had its beginning over 50 years ago. A desire to reach out to others and to share with them the good news of Christ. The elders feel that we have lost that spark, and we need to reignite it once again. I want to borrow a statement made by John the Baptist when Jesus came forth to begin his great ministry. As John looked at Jesus, he said, "He must increase, but I must decrease." Although certainly no identical parallel, the same thing will be true of Brother Worthy and me. This is the last sermon that I will preach as the primary preacher of this congregation. Beginning this week, he will begin his work as our preacher. He must increase, and I must decrease. It has been a wonderful time for me these past 30 years. I have considered myself blessed beyond measure to have had the opportunity to serve you, to work with you. You've made my work easy by your love, your understanding, and your patience. You cannot possibly know how much I love every one of you. When John made that statement concerning his status in relationship to Jesus, he did not mean that he was not going to continue working. John still had much to do. Although it will not be on a full-time basis anymore, there is still much that I hope to accomplish, just with a different emphasis. I hope to become more involved in personal work, in home Bible studies, working with you, reaching out to our friends and neighbors, to co-workers, and to relatives, anyone we can, with the gospel of Christ. And working together, we can do it, and with some good results, helping us to answer our greatest need, to rekindle that spark. Those two men who walked with Jesus that Lord's Day morning so long ago, they spoke of hearts which yearned for the good news of Christ. Who showed it by those words, "Was not our heart burning within us while he spoke to us in the way, and while he opened unto us the Scriptures?" I'm convinced that those words also speak of many in our day who long to know, who are just yearning to know what they must do in order to be saved, and who would follow Christ if they just knew how. We must do all we can to reach them, so they might learn and obey. Let's rekindle that spark. Let's make it glow, burn brightly, and touch lives and bring fruit to Christ, to his church. Perhaps there's one here this morning who will begin to walk with Jesus, who will take those steps which will make them a Christian, who will put Christ on in baptism this morning, and to begin to serve him all the rest of your life. Perhaps there may be some here who need to rededicate a life that has turned away. Maybe you want to come back. If you have a need that we can help resolve in any way, we invite you to come as we stand and sing. Softly and tenderly Jesus is calling.